All right, now about 92% of SA drivers feel unsafe when pulled over by SAPS. This is according to an Action Society survey on public trust in the police. The survey further revealed that the trust deficit in the police is a result of criminals using uniforms as a disguise to commit crime. Now, for more on the survey, I'm now joined by Ian Cameron, who is the Director Community Safety of Action Society. Ian, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. Ian, you did the study. Can you just unpack for us what you found in the survey?
Yes, thank you very much. So the study started after just increasing complaints that we receive about people saying that they get pulled over, getting asked for bribes, they get pulled over by bogus police. Often we see very current and actual reports happening about people being robbed by bogus police, etc. The study was done over a time of about a month, and it indicated that 92% of South African road users don't trust the South African police service when they are pulled over. It very clearly said that they do not feel safe. A very large amount of them said that they are unsure of what they should feel. They're not sure if they can trust police. And what was also interesting is that about 50% of people that participated in the survey indicated that they have been asked or demanded to pay bribe money when they are pulled over by members of the South African Police Service.
Well, that's quite an alarming number, but what I also find interesting is what are the loopholes that you found that allow for the South African Police Service to be used by criminals in such an easy way?
Well, I think there are a few things. I think from the top down, there's a serious leadership issue in the South African Police Service. There's a serious problem in terms of merit appointments not happening. We see cadre deployment playing a massive role in the identification of leadership figures in the South African Police Service, and obviously that filters down to the bottom level. Members in the South African Police Service aren't adequately held accountable when something does go wrong, and I believe that also filters down in terms of corrupt activity. So obviously that must have an influence. We very often see, for example, with cash in transit heists, that police firearms are seized from these scenes, including R5 assault rifles, 9mm pistols that are state issued, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole list of issues. What we have said is that the solutions are actually quite simple. I think firstly, we should do a very decent skills audit in terms of the management of the South African Police Service, and we need to polygraph all senior members and determine whether they have been involved in criminal activities or not, and if so, they need to be sacked and obviously prosecuted.
And we'll come back to some of those solutions that you did suggest in the survey. One other alarming thing is that in the latest quarterly crime stats that were released by the SAPS is that kidnappings have heightened quite a lot, with 37 kidnappings reported per day and 1,000 a month. And this is considered to be closely linked to a lot of fake police or people posing as police and being able to kidnap people.
That's correct. I think the alarming thing about that specific part, and something that Action Society feels strongly about, is that, you know, when someone is kidnapped or being threatened that they might be kidnapped, they need to be able to trust the police. But now we see that the very police members that need to be trusted, or then bogus police, use that opportunity to further or cause further mistrust with the public, and obviously people don't feel safe. So I think to describe it accurately, it feels like the South African Police Service, its firearms and resources are being used to build a type of a Trojan horse for criminals to really neutralize any form of trust that citizens in South Africa might still have left in the criminal justice system.
Now, in some of the recommendations that you made with regards to solutions, I mean, you mentioned a few a little earlier, but one of them is that to restore the reservist capabilities and also not to have reservists work within the same communities that they come from in order to ensure that there's no intimidation. How rife is that?
It's a massive problem. I would like to refer to areas like, for example, Khayelitsha, Diepsloot, Alexandra, Mitchells Plain, the list goes on. Just this past 2-3 weeks, I know of 6 or 7 murders in the Delft area in the Western Cape. We can both make lists of several areas that we know are very dangerous. Places like Inanda and KZN. We need specialized units and we need reservist capabilities to support those specialized units and to move in from different regions. As soon as you use local law enforcement to tackle violent, organized crime, it's very difficult to ensure that no intimidation takes place. The Shaul Kenya case in the Western Cape is a perfect example where police didn't protect him adequately, and so the same with people like Andre Lincoln and so on and so forth, where gang bosses eventually got to those police members. And the interesting part is it often happens because those very good police members are also investigating fellow senior officers that are involved with organized crime, and that's been shown by IPID reports, etc. So it's crucial that specialized units don't live locally, that they don't have any real, let's call it, investment in that specific community. It needs to be cold and objective policing to tackle violent, serious criminals.
Speaking of areas, are you finding that certain areas have more of a trust towards police based on the fact that police respond in a certain way? Are we finding different responses and trust issues on suburban areas as opposed to rural and more township areas?
In my experience, in most cases, people laugh at the police. They don't take them seriously. I was in a murder scene 3 weeks ago in Kalicha where a man was shot in his head by 2 unknown men that just walked up to him and shot him at point blank, and it must have been a hit. When we arrived on scene, it was interesting to see that most of the SAPS members didn't even get out of their vehicles. And I spoke to some of the local municipal law enforcement guys, and I said to them, but why aren't you making sure that SAPS get out? And they just shrugged. They just said, we're tired of struggling with the same thing. Police do nothing, or when you do arrest someone, he's just back out on the street again very soon. So I don't think trust is much, but it's also important to understand that the police don't have adequate resources and that the prosecuting authority don't do what they need to do. I had a case yesterday of an 8-year-old girl in Malmesbury that was raped by a suspect that was out on bail after he murdered someone. How on earth does an illegal foreigner, illegal immigrant, get bail in the first place for murder and then ends up raping an 8-year-old girl? So there are many of these very shocking cases where the prosecuting authority and the prosecution process is absolutely flawed, and therefore the trust can't be much. The last one I would like to mention is actually a girl from an area called Rocklands outside of Bloemfontein, close to Bolobedia. And in that township, she was raped, and it took 5 years for a conviction. And after she shared her story in court, she committed suicide. Had the criminal justice system worked properly, that young lady might still have been with us, and she could have helped us combat GBV.
These are really shocking stories and outcomes from what we're getting from our police service. What do you think the police service needs to do in order to restore this trust from the communities?
Well, I'm going to say it bluntly. I think Bheki Cele needs to be fired. I think he's a useless Minister of Police, and we need to restructure the entire management. We've just appointed a new National Commissioner, and the new National Commissioner has to retire in February of 2023. So what was the point of appointing him if he won't be able to serve a long-term, or rather have a long-term impact? So that's the first thing that needs to be done. All senior management members in the South African Police Service need to be polygraphed. It needs to be determined whether they've been involved in criminal activities. If so, they must be sacked and prosecuted. And on top of that, a skills audit needs to be done. If we don't sort out the leadership issue, there's no point in sticking plasters on the small wounds at the bottom. It's not going to solve the issues on ground level if we've got an unhealthy management system in the South African Police Service. And I think cadre deployment has destroyed SAPS. It's as simple as that. If political interference is going to continue in the South African Police Service, we will not see adequate policing happening across South Africa.
All right, Ian Cameron, thank you so much for your time in giving us that input with regards to the survey conducted by Action Society. Thank you so much for that. That's Ian Cameron, who is the Director of Community Safety for Action Society, and they're giving us their survey results with regards to 92% of South African drivers feeling unsafe when pulled over by the South African police members.